Well, hello everybody. Welcome to another great episode of the Rodcast. I'm Monty and I'm here today with the Rod. And so
Hey,
today, I'm excited to be able to talk to you, Pastor Rod, about an interesting topic, and I think it is a timely topic, and that is on the end times. Now, I know there's a lot of chatter out there, a lot of information out there on YouTube and the interwebs regarding the end times. And so I thought it'd be interesting today to talk about it, to understand what we believe and understand what Jesus ultimately said about the end times, and then maybe some practical steps of how we can navigate forward after that. But is there anything that you would like to open up with? Any comments or concerns that you have on this topic in particular?
uh, yeah, yeah. I've been a pastor for about 40 years now, and been saved 45 years. And the end times has always been a topic.
Hmm, interesting.
um, when I first got saved, it was a big topic because at that time there was great trouble in the world. There was wars, and there was oil shortages, and there was a lot of things. And come right through to today, we've got wars and oil shortages, and it seems
Hmm.
that that needle hasn't changed all that much. It's just that the new generation has not experienced a lot of the stuff before. So I think there is a real stirring for what does the Bible say about the end times? What is the sign of his coming?
Hmm.
And I think it's really good to talk about it. When I was a young believer, I got saved at 19, and the church I went to was very big into the end times.
Hmm.
And it actually was so much, it was so much stuff. We actually thought the 666 was someone back then, and that person's already passed away, so it's not them. And that in Australia we had bank card, like a first credit card, which had a B on it for bank, and people said, "Oh, that's 666," and it was really really big. And I got to say, it really affected me negatively. I think
Right.
it actually caused people to be distracted from our mission, which is what we're really talking about
Hmm.
today. Missions in the end time, or mission in the end times. That some of these things are very important to understand on a global or a macro or a helicopter view, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But a lot of the micro stuff has changed from year to year to year in people's, you know, books and blogs, and now YouTube videos and everything is trying to reflect a daily issue that's happening in the Middle East or other war zones, and
Hmm.
it's causing a lot of confusion. Way back then, the effect it had on me in being exposed to so much end times teaching was that I was sort of scared to get married, scared to have
Hmm.
kids, scared to buy a house. It was like Jesus is coming now. And it was
Right.
really quite dramatic, I think. And I don't know if that's the same today around the world, but we used to call it hanging out at the Rapture bus stop. That, yeah, yeah, we could do this and that, but the bus is coming soon. Like
Right.
we could do all these things, but the bus is coming soon. The rapture's coming soon, and
Mhm.
we could we could try and reach some nations, but the bus is coming soon. And we used to call it hanging out at the rapture bus stop. Rapture meaning the moment we're all taken off the earth to be with Jesus.
Hmm.
And I just think I've seen that. So I believe that there is an incredible need to teach on the end times, but I
Hmm.
also believe that there is an overuse right now of the end times and what's happening
Hmm.
to, some people are doing like a daily or a weekly update on the end times in the world. And I think, well, it wasn't written that way. Anyway, we can sort of get into some of that, but I just want to say
Right.
this is not a new issue. This is a
Yeah.
cyclical teaching issue.
Sure. I guess it would have been like so many moments, maybe not just 40 years ago when you became a Christian, but even further back, 80 years ago when there was World War II, and
Yeah.
further still World War One, and then hundreds of years before, there was all kinds of crazy things that happened in the world. There was the bubonic plague, there was, the Dark Ages, literally. Um, what do you think is the human fascination with the concept of the end times? Because, like you said, it's secular.
S- Yeah, whatever. Cyclical, cycle. Yeah.
Cyclical. That's the one. So why do you think it keeps coming back in cycles? Like, what is our obsession as humans with the end times? Because you'd think as a human race, we'd want to keep the race going. You know what I mean? Like, we want to
Mm.
keep on, producing and living a long and prosperous life. Why are we so then obsessed with like this gloom and doom end time stuff?
Oh, wow, I could answer that so many ways. One obvious one is that the Bible does talk about it clearly. Jesus did talk about it in Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
Mm,
Very clear, the end times. And then the book of Acts talks about the beginning of the end times was the day of Pentecost, where
right.
Peter preaches, this is what was spoken by the prophet Joel in the Old Testament. And it
Mm,
talks about this is the end times. So the end times is not like a day, one day. The end times is a period of time that we're in. We're in the end times.
mm,
So people say, "Are we in the end
okay.
times?" The answer is yes.
Yeah.
You know that, and many people who read the Bible know that the end times began in the year 33 AD, roughly, and
Right.
continues to today until the day of the Lord's return, which is Jesus said, "No one will know except the Father. No one, no one,
Mm,
no
right.
prophet, no Bible scholar. No one will know the time, but we will know some seasons, which we'll talk about it
Mm,
in a little while." But why
mm,
is it so grasp people's hearts? Is because there is an eternal warfare between the things of God and the things of the devil, and
mm,
we're in this world living between those two. Now, God's
mm,
much more powerful, of course, and we live in His Word, but there is this battle that we read about, and we long for an end to that battle. We long
right.
for the day that Jesus will stop suffering and pain and sickness and death, and that's a good
Mm,
thing. It's a good that we,
yeah.
it actually says in Thessalonians, we keep hope. We
Right.
hope. We're hopeful. We're hoping for God, and I think at certain times of the world history and at certain countries, even today, there are Christians crying out for Jesus to return because they're living in terrible times. They're living in
Mm,
horrible, horrible places right now. I don't mean the people are horrible. I mean the circumstances are horrible. And there is that cry, it says in Thessalonians, that we're longing for his coming. Um,
mm,
so I think there's a lot of answers to this, but I think there is something in the heart that wants to see a conclusion to the story. And the
mm.
story is that God wins, the devil loses, and we all go to heaven, right? That's a beautiful ending to a
Yeah.
big story.
Good ending.
Um, it is. And the Bible says very definitely Jesus' parables stay awake, stay hopeful, keep your
Mm,
oil burning, get ready for his coming. There's a lot of parables for the
right.
Christian to stay alert. I'd say that's the main, even though it's the last thing we probably will come back to. What do?
Right.
We keep alert, we keep awake, we keep ready. That's the word. Keep ready.
Yeah.
Live ready. And I was taught as a young Christian something I think is very good, and that is that plan as though plan as though Jesus is a long way from coming back, but live as if he's coming back today.
Mm, I like
So
that.
that concept that we've got to plan long term, but we've got to live like get ready because he could come back today. I think that's a really
Right.
good concept.
That's a great concept. And so, just to reiterate what you said, to be clear, like if people ask, are we living in the end times? The answer is yes, but we have been living in the end times since the day of Pentecost. So it's been almost 2,000 years of end times. So perhaps that's why there's maybe confusion when it comes to end times, when it comes to maybe end times signs
Hmm.
that people associate, especially in the sky, or wars, famine, plagues, which has happened recently in
Yeah,
our current moment in 2024. The past few years has had all of
yeah,
those things, interesting things happening. But I think it's interesting as well. You mentioned that is that eternity. God has put eternity in the hearts of man. So whether people are Christians or not, or believe in a different faith, there's a lot of concepts that lead back to an end times event. Whether
yeah,
it's like in Norse mythology, it's like Ragnarok, or like all this kind of stuff, right? There's all this like fascination throughout human
yeah,
history
yeah,
in an end times thing, and I just think, like you're saying, God has put eternity in the hearts of man. So let's talk about some of those signs
Mm.
that people often quote as being this is the proof that the end times, well, maybe let's not say the end times, that the end is close or the end is now. So it does talk in the Bible about certain things that happen in the sky, celestial events. And recently, there has been some celestial events, such as there was the big eclipse that went over a portion of America recently. In Japan, a few months back or half a year back, there was like the super moon, or like there's all these kind of things, right? That people seem to latch onto and say, you see, this is what Jesus talked about. So, what do you think? Like, how can we put these things that do happen into perspective?
I think one of the great things Jesus spoke about was wars, rumors of wars, things in the sky, etc. And these are the beginning of birth pangs. I think we
Mm,
need to see history through a series of birth pains or birth pangs. And the
right.
picture to me is birth pains is when a woman is going to give birth, the contractions, the birth pains come more frequently, they
Mm,
come more intensely, and they
mm,
come closer and closer to the final event. And I think that Jesus was using that word intentionally, like there'll always be wars, rumors of wars, and it
mm,
says in Luke 21 there'll be actually pandemics. It actually uses that word. There'll be
yeah.
pandemics, and it also uses the word tsunamis or the seismic activity on the sea. So
Mm,
everything we're seeing right now has happened in history, but it's a cyclical concept of more often, in more places, more frequently, and more intensity. And that is what we are seeing in the intensity of the storms, of hurricanes and cyclones and typhoons, the intensity, the frequency. You know, here in Japan, we talk about how many typhoons do we have this year? Was it 21 or 31? Like it's
mm,
intensity. It's
sure.
large, and in countries like the Philippines, it's even higher. And so there is a cyclical thing, but and it's happening more often. And I was reading about earthquakes that there've always been earthquakes. In fact, the Bible has mentions earthquakes, including the
Right.
day of Jesus' death.
Yeah.
Um, Big earthquakes. There's always been earthquakes, and all around the world, there's evidence of earthquakes.
Mm,
But the earthquakes are getting more frequent, and they're happening in new places. Like there's a little bit of earthquakes in Australia for the first time. There's been some sizable earthquakes, and parts of America, the Midwest, is unusual to have earthquakes, and so there's more earthquakes in more places, and we've had some of the biggest earthquakes ever in the last 20, 30 years. There was one here in
right.
Japan that was the
Yeah.
second largest on record, and the one in Indonesia, 2002, I forget, sometime around there, was the
Mm,
largest on record. There was ones in Chile and New Zealand and many parts of the world, bigger earthquakes, volcanoes. The world is alive right now with another cycle of these events. Is it the end of the end? I don't know, but Jesus said the birth pains will increase. And I think
right.
that's what we are seeing, and we can all therefore look at world events and say there's another sign, there's another sign, there's another sign. And that's true. The war in Israel versus Hamas, and Ukraine versus Russia, and the war in Sudan, and there's lots of little wars, and the world looks to your generation, Gen. What are you? Millennial,
Millennial?
millennial. Then there's Gen Z, and now there's Gen Alpha. So these new generations have not seen as much as I've seen because I've lived
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah.
I've seen more wars. I've seen more earthquakes, and it's just more. But there is more now than there's ever been,
Sure.
and there's more visual access through online to
Mm,
seeing live the volcano in Iceland right now, or the volcano in Hawaii right now, or the volcano in Indonesia right now. There's act like we're seeing things all the time that we never maybe
mm,
saw till weeks or months after in my generation.
right.
So there's more, and there's more access. And
Right.
so there is a lot of things to talk about the end times, but
Mm,
there are some things that have not happened yet. And that's really important what Jesus said, what
mm,
Jesus especially says in Matthew 24 and Mark 13, which we're going to go to in a minute. So there's
yeah.
there's more and more and more places, more. but there's some missing elements. By the
Yeah.
way, the one thing that is the most frequent sign mentioned by Jesus and the book of Thessalonians is deception in the last days. Deception. Many will
Mm.
say they're like Christ, here I am, here I am, here I am. And we're definitely seeing more of that through the internet, more followers of strange cults and strange teachings and people
Yeah.
getting deceived and going off track. There's just thousands and thousands of YouTubers and bloggers on these things. And I think that's where we have to be full of discernment,
Mm.
because a lot of that is either wrong, just dead straight wrong when people mention dates or they mention who is the Antichrist, or they've been wrong, or else they're just too much. Like from one country's perspective right now, like this happened this week and here's the scripture. This happened this day and here's the scripture, and relating daily events in the world to Bible verses. And
Mm.
I call that distracting. I
Yeah.
think that's a distraction from daily life.
Yeah.
I think that people who live in that zone are going to be full of fear and maybe make decisions. Like I said earlier, when I was a baby Christian at 19, not
Mm.
doing things I would normally do, like maybe not thinking about marriage, or maybe not thinking
Mm.
about children, or maybe not thinking about buying property or starting a business. There was actually um, distractions so great that people don't do normal things and people don't do mission.
Mm.
So this end time stuff, probably the main thing I'm going to say today is this end time stuff affects our life and affects our concept of mission in our lives for God.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. And like you said, this generation, my generation, was kind of the beginning of it, but the subsequent generations after me, they all have more and more access to information, to social media, to news or YouTubers or whatever it may be. There's so much more information. So maybe it feels like for younger people that sure, yes, there is scientific proof that there may be more frequency with certain events in the natural, such as natural disasters, wars, disease, all of that stuff. Yes, but it might feel like it's actually much faster or much more accelerated than it maybe other generations felt like, because we have so much access to, like you mentioned, all these different bits and pieces of information all around the globe. And when you add it up, it feels like there's so much more then perhaps like maybe it's just normal, the rate that things are going. Maybe you're right, it's just a moment of contraction for the world, but then there might be years that follow afterwards that might not be so hectic or intense. I see a lot of people pointing towards events that happen in Israel. There's a lot of talk about the events that happen in Israel now. They are currently in a war. It is a battle zone there. And all
Mm.
eyes seem to be on Israel when it comes to these end time predictions. It even goes so far as to, I think the latest thing was that I saw was something about these red heifers, these red colored cows, and it's like, this is it, guys, like buckle up, we're all going to heaven. Like, but it's not the first time there's been red cows in Israel or in the world. So I just think that there's so much scrutiny and focus on
Yeah.
Israel. Is there anything that you can say to shed light or make sense of why, first of all, there's so much focus on Israel?
Definitely God loves Israel, and
Mm.
but that doesn't make everything that happens in Israel right. And
Right.
I think Israel, big picture, Israel still has a place in God's timetable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Israel became a nation in 1948. That was an incredible, crazy miracle. It
Mm.
even says in Isaiah, "Can a nation be born in a day?" And it
Wow.
really wasn't a day, but it was very, very short period of time.
Mm.
And that's an end time prophecy that has
Mm.
come true in 1948. So definitely there are time stamps for Israel. And one of the greatest things in Israel in the future is the promise that Israelis or Jewish people will come to Christ in large numbers in the future, but among persecution.
Mm.
It's very definite that there's this linkage of very, very difficult times for Israel and many, many people coming to Christ. I wish that wasn't the case, but that is a
Mm.
prophetic word. So Israel definitely is part of the time clock. There's no question to me.
Yeah.
It has a part in God's heart, in God's future. It talks about in the future the times of the Gentiles or the non-Jews. It says in Romans 9, the time of the non-Jewish people will cease and the time of Israel will be grafted back somehow.
Mm.
I don't understand all that, but
Sure.
I don't think we're supposed to. I just
Yeah.
think we're saying
Good
it's
point.
going to happen. I don't know
Mm.
how or when or where or how. I said that twice. Maybe
Yeah.
that's what I don't understand. But
Yeah.
there's definitely prophetic history to do with Israel. But Israel's had so many wars and moments like this that they can't all be the same moment. They're actually birth pains as well. And
Right.
so I don't know. I don't know
Mm.
about Israel, but I do know this that Jesus says to us that there's going to be some things to happen before the end,
Hmm.
and one of them is mission in the world, and it hasn't
Yes.
happened yet. So this time of the
Mm.
Gentiles, the time of the non-Jews, has not finished. We're in it.
Hmm.
You're in it. Your generation's in it. And I keep
Yeah.
saying to this next generation, this could be your generation that takes the gospel to the ends of the world. So there's
Mm.
still world history to be concluded before Jesus gets back. And I think
Mm.
we need to talk about that. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's where I wanted to eventually get to, because I did want to bring up some of the counterpoints, let's say, some of the things that people do point to or mention frequently, proof this is the end is soon, the end is near in the next X amount of time. But there's so much extra that people don't mention that actually disprove that and say, hey, no, there's still time on the clock. There's still things that have yet to happen in some of the prophecies. And I guess one of the big ones we find Jesus talking about in Matthew 24, like you mentioned, the gospel going out. So,
Mm,
can you speak to the hopeful side of things? We kind of dealt with the doom and gloom side of things,
yeah.
but what is the hopeful side? What is the side that
Mhm.
gives the next generation hope that, yes, have a long and prosperous life? Plan, like you said, plan like the end is a long way away. What are some of the things that we can see from the Bible, even Jesus' words, that gives us hope?
Well, there's two really important scriptures from Jesus' lips. One is Matthew 24:14, and it's talking about all these things will happen, and then Jesus stops and says, "And this good news of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world or to every nation as a testimony, sorry, in the whole world as a testimony to all nations,
Mm.
and then the end will come." So Jesus puts a caveat or a stopper in the middle of the end time signs and says, "Oh, by the way, the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ must go to every nation." And that word means ethnic group. The Greek word is ethnos, which is ethnic. It means clan. It means groupings. The good news is going to go to every clan, every family group in the world, and then the end will come. And there's a very, very clear mission issue here.
Mm.
So I think this is where I get my theology from, or my understanding of the end times, is that we're not there yet. Now, Jesus could do anything; he could come back today, but from those words, it seems to
Yeah.
say there is a caveat, there is a stopper, there is a whoa, hold on a moment, everyone. This good news has to go to every nation. Now, this is also repeated when it's recorded in the book of Mark of the same thing. When Jesus is talking of the end times,
Mm.
in Mark 13, verse 10, it says here, and the gospel must first be preached to all nations, to all ethnic groups. And this word first. So this is going to happen, this is
Mm.
going to happen, there's going to be, but first, Jesus says first, the good news must go to every ethnic group, and then the end will come. Now, in the book of Revelation, there's also some scriptures there in
Mm.
chapter 5 and chapter 7 that in heaven there's going to be people from every tribe and every nation in heaven. And I don't think it's just like one or two, like, you say, oh, here's the Australians. Oh, look, there's a few million of them, and I don't know, a lot, I hope. Oh, look at this tribe. Oh, there's two of them. I can't see
Mm.
that. The concept of heaven is like the cloud of witnesses, the the bleachers in a a baseball arena. and from every nation there's a representative. And I read my end time theology is that this gospel will go with power to every ethnic group, and they're going to be in heaven because the
Mm,
gospel went to them, and they're going to be there. I think it's a really important theology. See, if the
yeah.
theology is just, yeah, Jesus is coming back now, there's a whole stack of people in this world, including Japan, that have never had a chance to even hear about Jesus. And I don't think that's I don't think it's what Jesus says. I don't think it's what Book of
Mm,
Revelation says. There's a very big caveat. Wait, whoa, whoa, stop, stop. Wait, this good news will go to every tribe and language and ethnic group, and they're going to be packs and stacks of people in heaven. And that's why we're in Japan, right, Monty? I mean, that's where we came,
mhm,
and you're here now by your
yeah.
choice. Um, and this gospel will go to Japan. That's our promise of mission. And I think that when people are hanging out at the Rapture bus stop, waiting for Jesus to come, they're missing the moment to reach new people, new languages, new tribes. So this stuff is really important in how we live our lives, which you mentioned that concept a
Mm,
moment ago. How do we live our lives? If we live our lives, the
mm,
world is bad, what's happening in Israel is bad, Jesus come. And yet there's a world waiting to hear the gospel. I think we'll get to heaven and Jesus will say, "Well, you were supposed to help reach the world in those years." That was
yeah.
the point of being a successful, happy Christian with resources, is that we actually pull together and reach nations. And I think that's a really
Mm,
exciting task, by the way, for your generation and Gen Z and Alpha generation.
mm,
They say, "What's left for us?" Well, you get to be part to reach the world. How exciting! Through online, through YouTube, through church services, through outreach, through all these things, the world coming together to reach the world is very. I think it's a powerful message, an amazing message, a motivating message. How would
mm.
you feel about all those things I just said? I'm sort of preaching right now.
That's a great concept that we have hope as the next generation. That because these things have not yet happened, it doesn't mean the end is around the corner. It means it's still a ways to go, unless our generation or all generations are mobilized to actually accomplish the Great Commission, which is go out, preach the gospel, and baptize people of every nation, right? That's literally Jesus's Great Commission to us. So I think some of this end time stuff for younger people, it can be a bit of an easy way out, an easy way out from responsibility, an easy way out from mission. It's a bit of a cop out to say, oh, because the world is ending in a few years, I'm just going to go and buy a bunker in the desert and wait out my days there with a bag of chips. Like it doesn't make sense to say that because that's not true. It's not the end of the days. It's a ways away. And I think it's helpful for people to understand that it is a ways away so that we can be mobilized, so that we can live our life to the fullest. Yes, there's lots of tough things going on. And yes, it would be easier if the world would end, right? Things would be easier. Things would be over. You wouldn't have to suffer through this and that. And some of it is just like, first world, pleasures that we get uncomfortable with this and that, politics, all that stuff. But like you mentioned earlier, there's people in certain nations that are really risking their lives and people's lives that are being taken because of their faith, because of what they believe. And we have this comfort over here that prevents us from accomplishing God's greatest commandment for our life, for purpose. So I'm excited by this concept. I'm excited by mission. I mean, that's why we're here in Japan, right? That's why you guys came. And that mission and that purpose that you guys had and that you guys led your life with and continue to do so is contagious. I think people that are struggling with what do I do? How do I find mission? I think you got to be able to get around people that speak positive, people that speak future, people that are not speaking gloom and doom. Like we got to maybe get some of those voices out and bring some positive voices in, whether that's global, around you or on YouTube, because there are all kinds of interesting voices on YouTube, but you could also find some good ones. You know, you could find some good voices that speak future and hope.
Yeah.
And I would just say,
Mhm.
lastly, at the end of my little spiel here, is that if we are living in well-off nations, first world nations, if anyone ever hears this, then why not get involved with missions? You know what I mean? Why not be involved? Because
Yeah.
I think they talk about this, what is it, 2040 window? 1040 window? What is that one?
Yeah. Yeah. 1040. Yeah.
1040 window, where most of the people in this window of the world has never heard. Now that's a big mission. That's a lot to be done, which means I think the timeline for the end of the world is a ways away. But we need to get mobilized. We need to get involved. And people that have means, why not use that for the kingdom of God? Why not use
Mm.
that to bless the world, to further God's plan here on the earth? So that's really exciting for me as a millennial, as a younger person, as someone that is surrounded by information. I'm still, yep, I don't, ignore the the bad things that are happening, but I also don't want to ignore Jesus' promises and the Word of God. So, with that being said, do you have any other last comments or things that you'd like to encourage people with in terms of
Yeah.
mission?
Yeah. I think we need to think through this end time stuff, as you said, because this will affect the way we see our future. It
Mm,
will. So deeply think through this and realize that, that in the world, almost a third of the world has never heard of Jesus Christ.
right,
3.5 billion people have never heard. It's actually
huge.
42%, more than a third.
That's crazy.
Here in Japan, 125 million people, and we meet
Yeah.
people every single day have never heard the name Jesus. So it's like, is it is it real? Is there a real issue?
Mm,
Yes. I think there's an excitement to looking at that, to
mhm.
seeing the world, to seeing how we can band together and pray and give and go and to see something happen. Because I this is my last thought. I believe heaven is going to be a place of worship, but it's also going to be a
Mm,
place of storytelling where we all get to tell our
yeah.
stories. And some people are going to tell how they reached these people and they gave money. And for example, we love to give to New Delhi slum kids, and we're going to meet them in
Mm,
heaven as probably believers
wow.
in the future. Um, and they'll tell us their story, and wow, we actually were part of that story. And I mean, Jesus is the hero, but we were part of the
Yeah.
story. And I think there's going to be some
Yeah.
Christians up in heaven with crickets, they're silent because they don't have a story.
Mm,
And I think we need to think through this issue of rewards, story,
mm,
relationships forever and ever and ever. I think that is motivational with
mm,
mission that we give now, but we're part of this incredible party of storytelling and rejoicing and worship in heaven.
mm.
And I want to motivate people. This is something we need to reflect on. Heaven is real and it's long.
Yeah.
Let's get our stories
Hmm.
ready for heaven. These stories don't get us to heaven, all right? We're not talking about salvation. We're saying when we get to
Yeah. Yeah.
heaven, we get to tell stories, be part of stories, laughter, hearing all these incredible
Mm,
things that people did because we connected, and this is a very big end point, but I really think it's true.
great.
We're going to meet people in heaven that we never knew, but somehow our lives touched and the gospel went, and they're there and their relatives are there, and it's a huge celebration going to happen.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I'm excited for all the life that is ahead of not just me, but anybody that's listening or watching. I believe God has a good plan. We talk about Jeremiah 29:11 all the time here at Lifehouse. And so our prayer is that for you, that you would experience God's good, amazing, perfect plan in your life. But let's also share it with the world. Thank you so much, Pastor Rod, for another great episode of the Rodcast. Make sure, if you're listening, tune in next time for some more great content. We'll see you later. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you enjoyed today's episode, why don't you subscribe on whatever platform you are listening to this, and we'll see you next time.